Thank you. Please be seated. So today's scripture lesson is one that's very familiar. And the problem with something that's very familiar is sometimes we don't hear it because, yeah, I know that already. But I want you to hear it and listen to it differently today. And I'm going to do my best to help you to hear a story and to experience it like you've never, ever experienced it before. I can see the concern on your faces already. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered round him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, "A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly, but the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear." Then there was a need for Jesus to then explain the parable. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on the rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the world, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. So, this is a parable about hearing. It's a parable about listen. Do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, oh, closer. Let me whisper in your ear. Say the words you want to hear. I'm in love with you. Listening. The whole parable is about hearing and listening. Steve has a good friend named Al Sterling. Wasn't he a youth in your youth group and then became a youth minister? Yes. Okay, so this explains a lot by what he's going to say. He is quoted saying, "God will speak to you in two ways. He will whisper in your ear, or hit you upside the head with a brick. Listen for the whisper. The brick hurts every time." The messages from God come from everywhere. How in the world can I say that? Because God created us and God knows how it is we learn. We all learn in different ways. I can give you a perfect example. Last Wednesday, Kevin and I were having lunch together, and we were talking about how we're rediscovering analog music. Analog music, for many of you, that's the music that you heard on your albums, music that was recorded in a studio on a piece of, tape, recording tape. And we were talking about how the sound is like more pure. And then Kevin started to describe to me technically what was taking place. He says if you looked at the sound waves on the machine, whenever a person on an analog recording is singing high and the pitch goes high and the sound gets louder, you'll notice that the wave goes up and it comes down. He says, but it's a very smooth, continuous. He said the same thing happens in a digital recording, but because it's digital, it goes up in little steps. Now, immediately in my mind, because I'm visual, I said, oh, like the difference between seeing a photograph on 35 millimeter film compared to a digital photograph. You see, the film will take the image. The photograph, how clear it is, depends on how many pixels per square inch you have, right? So if you were to take a portrait with 35 millimeter film and you were to look at the curve of the jaw, and then you took the same portrait on digital, if you kept blowing the digital picture up, what you would notice is that the jaw is not so smooth. That is these little squares, right? Pixels. Learning took place. One from a technical hearing and the other one from visual. That's what I mean. We all learn in different ways, and the messages are coming from everywhere. You can get the messages from reading the Bible. God teaches us through the Bible, but you kind of need to know how to read the Bible, because it can be dangerous if you don't know how to read the Bible. You can get the messages through study. I'm thrilled I went to seminary. I wish every person of faith would spend 3 years of their life going to an accredited seminary. It's an incredible experience. You learn so much about your faith and and it gives you the tools so that you can then study later. Literature. I've never been one to believe that you need to go to a Christian bookstore to buy a Christian book. Who's to say that the stories that people write from all over the world and all kinds of cultures, that their stories are not any more Christian than others? It's love, typically, is at the core of most stories that we read, right? But the messages come through us through literature, come to us through poetry, through science. I've shared with you in recent weeks how I have learned more about my consciousness and my soul from reading about science than I have from anything else, from any kind of spiritual books. The messages come to us through mathematics. If you watch the series on Genius with Albert Einstein, he's always talked about how he sees God in mathematics. It comes to us through movies, through plays, through sports. How many sports stories have you heard that inspired your soul about seeing someone overcoming something in their lives and they do it on the field of sport? It comes to us through nature. Nature's all around us. It comes to us through quiet. Comes to us through loud music. Turn that noise down. Any of you grow up with that? Any of you here ever say that to your kids? I won't ask you to raise. Okay, well, I'm sorry, Marco. You outed yourself. But, and sometimes the message comes to us through an infant sleeping and the noises that they make, right? The messages come to us from all kinds of places. It comes to us from the smell of fresh cut grass. It comes to us through dew on roses. Ever walk through a rose garden early in the morning? And the smells, the little water droplets on the petals. God sends us messages through classrooms, all kinds of classrooms. God sends us messages through professors and through teachers. God first opened up my mind in a humanities class at Seminole Community College through Dr. Parker. Opened my mind completely. It was my beginnings when I was 18 years old. God opens our minds and gives us messages through books, 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 but read. Yes, I believe God can even inspire us through Facebook and Twitter. I suppose God can tweet, but I think the deep messages are in the things that we read. Read. I know it's old school. It's old-fashioned. That's okay. I'm 60 now. I can do this. I've got license. Read. Read everything that you can read. Anything that strikes your curiosity. Read, because the messages are there. I think God sends us messages when we walk through the woods on a cold fall day. You know that smell? You know, the smell of dry leaves, and the sounds of them crunching under your feet. You know that smell? And the colors. God speaks to us when we're at the ocean and you hear and see the rhythm of the waves washing the shore, hitting the rocks. It's that, I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? Because ever fall asleep at the beach? It's almost like, you're rocking in the arms of God, right? The messages come to us the messages come to us through humor. Oh my God. Laughing. And maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility God can send you messages through one of my sermons. Just maybe. But the messages come through us in the macro and the micro. The messages come through us through the planets in the universe, and the messages come to us through quantum physics. The messages come to us through what is visible and what is invisible. The messages come to us through what is life and what is death. The messages are everywhere. And the seeds that the farmer sows in the story are the seeds of enlightenment. And God in the story is the irresponsible farmer. And I say irresponsible. Any of you know a farmer? Any of you from the Midwest know a farmer who would take that very precious seed that cost money and just sow it everywhere? No, but this God of ours is irresponsible in the way this God sows seed. He takes a bag of seed and flings it everywhere. Abundance of seed just everywhere. Does not care where it lands, you see. And the seeds that God is throwing are the seeds of enlightenment, the seeds of knowledge, the seeds that inspire us and help us to know who we are and what our purpose on this earth is, and to empower us to fulfill who we are as human beings created in God's image. So, the question is not then, is God still speaking? It seems to me that God is speaking all the time in a plethora of ways. The real question is this: are we hearing? Are we listening? Hearing and listening. You might think that those two are the same thing, but they are not. It's a big difference between hearing and listening. Oftentimes, I will have people come to me who are at the end of the rope in a relationship. And both ends of the rope end up in my office. And I'll have the two people just sitting there, and I say, well, tell me what's going on. And I just sit back and just watch it all happen right before my eyes. One person starts telling the story, and I'm looking at the body language of the other one. And before the other person can finish their point, this one then interjects and interrupts and starts giving their side of the story. And while they're talking, the other person's already now mad because they got interrupted, and here we go again. And you see that there's no eye contact between the two individuals whatsoever. And while this person over here is talking, this person's eyes, and it always seems to be up and left. I can already see there's no listening going on at all. They're thinking about what they're going to say next. I'm hearing a lot, but there's very little listening going on. My dad used to say about my mother when they would get into an argument, when your mother gets mad, she doesn't become hysterical, she becomes historical. Okay, all right, there you go. So as a person is starting to make their point, then someone's bringing up something that they did 10 years ago. How dare you say that and right now, and I can't believe you remember when? And now both people are defensive. Very little communication is taking place, you see. So when I get to a point where I have all the information that I need and all of my patience is now gone, I stop them and I say, okay, we're going to do this a different way. What I need person one to do is to share with person two what happened and how it made you feel using first-person language. So in other words, person two, when you said this the other day in front of that group of people, I felt these things. No accusations, no judgments. This is just how you felt. And you would be surprised how hard that is. Person one, after a couple minutes of coaching, is able to communicate that. Person two, then I asked them to repeat what they heard. And you would be surprised how hard it is for people to repeat what they just heard. Well, what I heard person one say, but I can't believe what, or there you go again. No, I said, no, stop. No, you're just simply repeating what you just heard. Just repeat. No interpretation, no, just what. And 10 minutes later, they finally will say, I heard that when I did in front of them, you felt these things. And immediately you just see just the weight of the issue just, because you know what the healing is? Person one finally felt like they were what? Listened to. Yeah. Hearing and listening. There's a difference. God is whispering, yelling, screaming, talking in regular voice in a plethora of ways. You hear it, but are you listening? So the issue is not, is God speaking? The issue is, are we listening? And not only are we listening, are we allowing the words that we hear and the messages from God take root? So Jesus helps us with this. Jesus does. Jesus helps us with this by giving a parable with 4 different kinds of soil. All right, so you have soil. Well, and the first 3 of these soils have to do with hearing and listening and interference with those things. So the first soil is a hard path. So as he tells the story, it says, he throws a seed on the hard path, and before the seed even has a chance to take any kind of root, birds will fly in and snatch it away. In the Greek, and when I read this in the Greek, the Koine Greek, the language of the New Testament, the word snatch is much more violent. It means to be seized and forcefully taken away. So what he's describing is someone whose life experience is such that if they even hear the messages of God and enlightenment, that their life experience won't even allow them the message to even take root at all. It snatched away, seized away, pulled away. And this can be people who grow up in a culture and an environment that's extremely violent, a culture and environment that if you show any vulnerability whatsoever, you're dead. It could be an environment that's overly religious, where religion is something that is a huge burden, you see? And once they can escape it, they don't want to have anything to do with it again because they equate that religion and God as one, you see? So I don't blame someone who's in this place. If you learn their life and you see the shoes that they've walked in and you walked in those shoes yourself, you can understand why some of the messages that God is sending somehow are snatched away, taken away, seized and taken away forcefully. The second soil is that of rocky soil, which, as he describes in the parable, as soil that allows the roots to start growing, but they don't have depth because there's just not a lot of dirt there. So as soon as the sun really comes out and the weather gets hot and dry, then the plant withers and dies. And he's talking about people who gladly hear the message and gladly accept it, but then when life happens, they fall away. And uses the word specifically in this passage, persecution. That remember when these Gospels were being written, followers of Jesus were being severely persecuted. I mean, like really persecuted, like fed to lions, that kind of stuff. Crucified in masses, and imprisoned. So there was a real issue. Keep the faith, keep strong. But there's another word in there about the falling away, and that word is scandalizo, which sounds like the word Scandal. And that literally means stumbling block. So when the stumbling blocks of life come along, you get caught up in those things, and those words that you heard so gladly start losing strength in your life, and you fade away. I remember growing up being told to give your life to Jesus and all your problems will go away, and they did not. That was a big fat lie. Then it occurred to me, no one was more Jesus than Jesus, and he ran into some issues, right? The third soil is that of the thorns. This is interesting. This represents people who are worried all the time. All the time. And it chokes the message. Now, when I looked up the word to choke in the Greek, it's stronger. It means utterly choke. That means more choking than choking usually, all right? Utterly choke. So people who are caught up in worrying. I get it. My mother called me a worrywart when I was a little boy. I don't think that it was a horrible image in my mind, but I didn't want to be one, but I couldn't help myself. And my father said, "Don't worry about the old mule going blind. Go ahead and load the wagon." I thought it was a weird saying, but my dad had lots of those. But I was a person, while we were in a task, I was already worried about what might happen, 2 or 3 days from now. And so, looking back, I can see more the wisdom in his saying. People who worry. And when you're caught up in worry, you're not thinking about enlightenment. It's like treading water in the middle of the ocean waiting for someone to rescue you. When you're treading water, you're thinking about what? Keeping your nose at least a half an inch to an inch above the waterline, right? You're not thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization, right? You think, how can I stay alive until somebody gets here? And so when we are caught up in worry about finances and about wealth and about children and about school and about, what could happen and what might happen and this happened and what might happen, then we are no longer have the capacity to hear the messages that God is sending to us all the time. So it becomes obvious to me then that not only do we need to be able to hear the messages and listen to the messages, but we also must have the capacity to allow them to take root so that we can, what? Live the messages. Yeah? So then there's the fourth soil. And it said, and then the fourth soil is a good soil. Now, good in our culture is relative, isn't it? You can go up to most anybody on any day and say, "How are you doing?" "I'm pretty good." Now, their life can be falling apart. But that's what we do, right? Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Garrison Keeler from Pray Your Home Companion made a whole career about the people in Lake Wobegon, right? A guy in Lake Wobegon could win the lotto on Saturday night, and his friends see him on Sunday morning and say, "Well, Joe, how's it going?" "Oh, it's pretty good." The music minister that we had before Kevin was Cindy Tassie. She was from Iowa. And as I was getting to know Cindy when I first came to this church, we're talking about our choir and about church music, and we came up with strategies and things and so then I would follow up in our staffing meetings and say, "So Cindy, how's it going with the choir?" "Oh, it's pretty good." "Cindy, I hope someday that when I ask that question, you can say, it's great. It's absolutely, I am so proud. It's so wonderful." She says, "Oh, well, when I say it's pretty good, that's what I mean." The fourth soil is good. Well, when I read the passage in the Greek, the word good is kalos, transliterated K-A-L-O-S, kalos. And I started reading what this definition of this word means. I felt a stirring in my heart. Powerful. Powerful stirring in my heart. Because I know that when people wrote this and read this in the first century, they knew what this word meant. Whereas in our culture, it's translated good, which is an accurate translation. but it doesn't mean anything like it meant in the Koine Greek. And when people were hearing Jesus saying it in the first century, they knew what he was saying, the good soil, but it sounds very different than what you and I typically associate with good. So this is what kalos means. Hold on to your hats. This is going to blow you away. It means beautiful, handsome, excellent, eminent, choice, surpassing, commendable, admirable, beautiful to look at, magnificent, excellent in its nature and characteristics, therefore well adapted to its ends, genuine, precious, competent, able, noble, kalos. That's what it means in the Greek. Pretty good, eh? Now, as I was reading the definition of kalos, how many of you thought that it applied to you? If we're not hearing God's messages, if we're not listening, and they're not taking root, maybe there is the core of the problem. Because we think we don't have good soil. Maybe we think we have pretty good soil. Some pretty good soil with some weeds and a few rocks. You see, when I see these different soils, I don't think that they describe one person here, I think all of us at different times in our lives represent these different kinds of soil. Kalos, good soil. What it means is, I'm going to repeat myself because some of you thought I was talking about somebody else, but this time I'm talking to you. It means that you are beautiful, that you are handsome, that you are excellent, that you are eminent, that you are choice, that you are surpassing, that you are commendable and admirable, that you are beautiful to look at. It means that you are magnificent. It means that you are excellent in your nature and your characteristics. Therefore, you are well adapted to meet the ends of whatever it is God is calling you to do. It means that you are genuine. It means that you are precious and competent and able. And it means that you are noble. Yeah. That's you in your purest sense. In the moment that you were conceived, in the moment that you started to form in your mother's womb, in the moment that you emerged upon this planet, that's who you are, because that's how God created you to be. Unfortunately, though, as life goes on, people do things to us, people say things to us, our culture, the religions we grow up in, all these things start giving us messages. Messages that start hardening that beautiful heart. Messages that start choking out with weeds and thorns, messages that fill us full of rocks. And we forget how beautiful and magnificent we are. I know that in my own journey, it took me years to undo the negative messages I grew up thinking about myself. Years. And I worked on it. When I do counseling, 90% of my work and my effort is to get people to let go of the negative, horrible images they have of themselves. And when they finally get past that, then it's like a light turns on. Literally, I can see it. It's like in their eyes. It's like someone flicks on a switch, and all of a sudden their eyes become bright. And then you start seeing their life where improvement was like this, goes like that. Seriously. David, am I telling the truth? When you're counseling, you can see that moment, can't you? Any other counselors here? Jill, you know that moment, right? You see it when it comes on. Yeah. When you finally get them past that place and they can start seeing themselves for who they are. And it's in this soil, it's in this place that when the seeds of God are heard and listened and planted, that then we start to become and produce the life that God created us to be. And Jesus says we will harvest a crop that's 30, 60, 100 times more than what was sown. Yeah. All you Carlos people out there, there's just Carlos all over this place. Good people. Good people. So those of you who have ears, listen. And those of you who have ears, hear what God is saying to you right now. Listen. Do you want to know a secret? Do you promise not to tell? Whoa, whoa, oh, closer. Say the words you long to hear. God's in love with you. You and you. Listen's a lesson. Let us pray. Gracious, beautiful God, I have taken the seeds that you have so bountifully planted in my heart and thrown them out here today as abundantly as you have thrown them toward me. And I know that there are people here who still think I'm speaking to someone else or about someone else, but I pray that whatever fertile soil in each soul that is here, that starting today, everyone here will start seeing how beautiful and handsome and magnificent and eminent and prominent and precious and able and noble they are. Because it's when we can hear and when we listen and when we allow your enlightenment seeds to take root in our souls, that not only are we transformed, but we transform the world around us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.